Welcome to the Call to Farms podcast. I'm your host, Sophia Ing. What if the food that you trust the most isn't actually nourishing you? Not because it's fake, but because something essential has been stripped away long before it ever reaches your table. Today, organic has become the gold standard. But what if organic isn't enough? What if the real conversation isn't about labels, but about life in the soil, integrity in sourcing, and whether the people growing your food actually see it as a responsibility, not just a business? This is something our family has wrestled with deeply. As we've built our own homestead and pursued a more intentional way of living, we kept asking a simple question: where do you actually find food you can trust at scale and consistency, and with values that align with how we believe food was meant to be grown? That search is what led us to Azure Standard, not just as a place to buy food, but as a company rooted in something much deeper. Today's guest, Tim and I talked to David Stelzer, the CEO of Azure Standard and one of the largest independent distributors of organic and non GMO food in the country. But what makes this conversation different is that we just don't talk about products. We go deeper into what it actually means to move beyond organic into regenerative agriculture, nutrient density, and a way of farming that reflects stewardship, responsibility, and ultimately alignment with how food was designed to nourish the body. We also talk about the tension many families feel today, wanting clean food, but not knowing who to trust or how to source it consistently. And on a personal note, Azure has played a role in our own journey. Our book, The Nourishing Asian Kitchen, is available through Azure Standard, which makes this conversation even more meaningful as we explore the shared values around real food, traditional preparation, and building a supply chain rooted in integrity. If you've ever questioned whether organic is actually enough or wondered what it would look like to source food with deeper intention, this conversation is going to challenge how you think about nourishment at its core. So let's get into it.
All right, David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're huge fans. We're definitely consumers of Azure Standard, and we recommend your products to all of our listeners out there. And it's great that we're finally able to connect. We've been passing each other at homestead conferences, but we're finally happy that we're able to sit down and speak with you. If you don't mind, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, I'm David Stelzer, and nearly 40 years ago, I founded Azure. And at that time, it was just an idea. But today, we've made that idea a reality, and we now are able to deliver healthy organic food. Stressing a healthy and abundant lifestyle in all 50 states. And around 4,000 different communities throughout the country. And so we're very excited to be able to support the healthy lifestyle journey with food and products that promote good health.
Yes. When we first bought our quarter acre in the Bay Area, I remember, almost embarrassed to admit, it was before I found and discovered Azure Standard, but I made sure that through Instacart, which is a food delivery service, I made sure that Whole Foods was delivering to our zip code. And now when we moved out to East Tennessee, fast forward, many, many years later, I'm literally looking at Azure drops to make sure that where we're looking to purchase has an Azure drop near us. But David, thank you so much for coming on our show. We first discovered Azure Standard. A friend had told us about it when we started on this journey to grow our own food in bulk. And I remember someone had said, "Think Costco, but for organic food." And I thought, well, that's really cool. And since then, when we first discovered Azure and the power of what Azure can do to bring the community together, to make it accessible, to make organic, clean food accessible for our community, we had actually put together a bulk packing event where many of us would come together, buy your large uh, bulk packaging, and then we would repackage for every other family who was involved and split,
Mm,
beans, split rice, split sugar and salt, and it was great. That was during our time in California.
okay. We have a few that do that, but that's not the majority. Most of the, delivery drop points don't do that. They make everyone buy their own.
Yes.
Yes. That's when we first got in.
That's when
That's
we
why.
first started. It was right during the 2020 timeframe, and
Yeah.
we were just not sure, and I'd wanted to plan like a community, a bonding event together. So that's what we did.
Okay.
Now we order and
Oh,
stock
yeah.
up. And then so one of the things I wanted to ask you was how you got started and what your philosophy is as a family and as a business.
Well, yeah, so I got started as a farmer. We were farmers first. In fact, you asked me what the call to farm was for me, and, I was kind of born into it. As far as I know, as far back as we can trace, we've never had anybody that wasn't a farmer in my direct, line. So I guess I come from a long line of farmers. Um, but, when I was in high school, I was very, very much pushed to become, go get a degree in finance or something like that because, hey, you don't want to waste your life on a farm. This is like, this whole thing. And I remember struggling with that at one point in my life. It was almost like, a struggle um, of faith. Hey, do I have faith in being able to do this or not? And I remember one day I was out feeding the cows, and we had a, I don't know, probably about 40, 50 head at the time. But it was in about an 800-acre pasture, and it was a winter, and there was deep snow, um, and there was some cows missing. And so I walked down this trail. It was probably a mile and down a hill and through a canyon and trying to find the missing cows because I thought maybe one was having an off-season calf or something. And anyway, I ended up finding the cows, and they were just, you know, hanging out in some pine trees in the back 40. And so I'm walking back, and I'm just thinking about this. And I'm just thinking about this. And I finally sit there in the snow and do, you know, do I really believe that what we do in farming, does it make a difference? Is it worthwhile? Or should I go for something where there's a lot easier money? Because at the time, we were struggling financially as a farm. It was not easy. It's not always, easy. And I made a commitment right then and there. And I think I was probably 16 years old at the time, maybe 15 or 16, that I was going to give the farm my all.
Mm.
And it didn't matter,
Wow.
because it was a worthwhile thing. My dad used to say that the farmer is the guardian of the nation's health.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know that very many farmers feel that way.
Hmm.
Um, but it sunk into me that we are absolutely the guardian of the nation's health.
Hmm.
It is our responsibility to make sure that America, and really the world in many ways, but if we just say America is fed or has the opportunity to eat a healthy diet where you're going to gain nutrients and be able to get everything that you need to have a full and healthy life, basically. And I believe that that's true. And I've been a bit of a purist. And so I've always thought, hey, food is our medicine if we eat right. And I do realize there's more to it than just food. At first I kind of thought, oh, this is a food thing, but it's not. just food. It's food and it's lifestyle, which includes exercise and, activity and purpose and those kinds of things. Those are very important to health. And then spiritual and emotional health is very, very important to our physical health. Sometimes people think that's separated, but we are not separated. If we are, because we are spiritual and emotional beings as well as, and I put those together, but, in a way you could separate those two if you want to. But, if we have a greater purpose than ourselves, if we have a spiritual ambition, if we have and we can keep a positive driven attitude, it plays into our health in a very, very real way. So food is one of 3 pillars towards health. But, as a very young child, I was a very, very sickly kid. And that was partly why my parents switched their eating habits and eventually switched to organic farming, was because food made all the difference for me. I was not expected to live as a very young child. They said, the doctors, there was nothing for me. They could keep me medicated. I might make it for a while. My parents didn't really want to accept that, and ended up finding a naturopath that made a recommendation of a major diet change. My parents did that. This was when I was about 4 years old, and I began to improve. And as well as there were other byproduct improvements in the family as well. And, by the time I was, 7 or 8, I was probably as healthier as any other child
Mm.
at the time. And that was purely through diet change. There was nothing else, just diet.
What was that diet change?
Well, there was 2 things for me. One was that they recommended an absolutely clean diet. And pretty much, in those days, it was it wasn't necessarily organic so much yet because they didn't really know about that. Dad learned about that, 6 or 7 years later. And he switched to organic when he learned about the chemicals. But it was throw away all the white stuff. Throw away the white sugar, the white flour, the Crisco, all that denatured food that has been denatured to the point that it's not real whole food. So we didn't. So my parents absolutely did exactly that. In fact, they didn't really want to waste it, so they threw all their white flour and white sugar together in a big pot, and they kind of cooked it up, and they fed it to the chickens. And all but 5 chickens were dead the next morning.
Oh,
Oh,
gosh.
wow.
So yeah, that helped make them a believer too.
There you go. I had a very similar experience after I had our first daughter 14 years ago and did the same thing, although with Asian ingredients. I went through
Mhm.
all of our Asian sauces, all of the condiments in our refrigerator, and one by one, I just threw everything away. And that's just sometimes the only way to do it. And that was when I realized truly that even though we were cooking from scratch, or cooking at home, it wasn't cooking from scratch and with clean ingredients, and that made all the difference for all of our individual health for all of us in the family.
Mhm.
That's an
No.
incredible story.
So I became pretty passionate and have been because I've had to eat different. Well, the second half is I ended up having an allergy. My microbiome, for whatever reason, does not digest dairy products particularly. And even, 100% raw milk or any of that, I I just don't digest it. Now, all my kids do, and we have a cow at our house, but I can't use the dairy products. So it didn't pass down to the next generation or anything like that, but for whatever reason, my microbiome was never able to handle it. Still to this day, I can't really use dairy products. So that was the other diet change that the naturopath recommended. But that was just for me. The other diet change was for the whole family.
Yeah, the clean
That's the one that made all the difference. And then we've been getting cleaner and cleaner over the years. Once we learned about agricultural chemicals, not that we didn't know about it, after all, we were farmers. But we didn't, I remember my dad, this was, probably in 73-ish, and he's out there to his elbows in this pink wheat that was, it was treated, how garden seeds are treated and they're pink. Well, he was doing that on a bulk scale, and he was spreading it out in the, in the grain drills, and, he was up to his elbows, breathing it, whatever. He says, I wonder why, it's like, I wonder why this is pink. Well, it's because it's treated wheat. It's for seed. But, why would it be pink? What is going on with that? So he went to the treating company that did that and asked them what was in the grain that they were required by law to make it pink, so no one ate it. Turns out there was a bunch of toxic chemicals, but primary active ingredient was mercury.
Wow.
And well, why do we put mercury on our wheat? What's the reason we want to put mercury on the wheat that we're putting in? They said, well, it's for smut. Crazy thing is, we're in Eastern Oregon. We don't have smut. We never saw smut before he treated wheat. That was the last time he ever planted treated wheat. He's never planted it since. That's been 55 years ago now, pretty close. And we've never seen smut since.
Well, we're really grateful your dad asked that question.
And he realized, hey, he was breathing this stuff in. It was dusting into his body, not to mention putting it in the soil.
Right.
Why do we want to put that into the soil? And so, I mean, he was pretty concerned about that. And yeah, so that was what started the organic farming journey originally. Actually more for my dad than for me. But our passion is really, to supply food that will promote healthy bodies and healthy families. That's our passion here at Azure. And it's because the connection is so difficult. There are a few farmers. A farmer he's in a tough position from an economic standpoint. He has to hold out both hands, and he says, how much? How much do I pay for fuel? How much do I pay for tractors? Whatever. And he holds out the other hand. Well, how much will I get for my wheat or my beef or whatever it is I raise? And, oh, well, that's set by the Chicago Board of Trade or by the Iowa Beef Council or what? He has no choice over anything. He has no, except for quantity. So his only way to success is to produce more tons, more tons of beef, more tons of wheat, corn, soy, whatever they're raising, which means quality suffers. But there are a few farmers that care about the quality of their food and the quality of what they produce. And that's Azure's job. That's what we do well, I believe, and we keep striving to do even better, is to find those farmers and to find the consumers that care about the quality of the food that they eat. Because that is my passion. We're the connector. We connect the farmers that care about what they grow with the consumers that care about what they eat.
Yeah.
This brings up a question then. You mentioned that the quality suffers for many of the farmers. I'm sure that that's not their intent, that they're just trying to put food on the table for their own families. And I'm sure that they do want to provide good quality stuff, but because of economics, they're forced to maybe cut some corners or maybe do.
Well, you get what you incentivize, right? And so a farmer is incentivized to produce more tonnage, not uh, not a better balanced protein, for instance. All his incentive is more tons. And how do you blame somebody for trying to be economically viable? I mean, they have property taxes to pay, they have mortgages to pay many times. There are sometimes operating loans involved for some farmers.
Yep.
They've got to make all those payments. And so they use shortcuts, for instance, anhydrous ammonia. Okay, I can get more tons if I put on more anhydrous ammonia. And I use hybrid varieties that will take the extra anhydrous ammonia because most of the old heirloom varieties can't handle that.
No, it would
Right.
kill him.
Well,
It's not the commercial farmers aren't focused on nutrient density.
no, and so my question then is for those that are wanting to farm and do good quality products that will meet Azure standard, how did they make money then? What would be their business model?
You're marketing your quality and not your quantity. And that's where Azure helps to connect. But there's many people that do that. They can go to the local farmers market and do that as well. I'm not saying that it has to be through Azure. You can do that on your quarter acre
Mhm.
and take your food to the local farmers market and you tell people about it. So you're marketing your own food, or you take it, to your local, um, independent grocery store. I know a lot of the bigger ones don't take local produce anymore, um, without GAP certification at the very least, but
Some
there there's a few.
Well, David, I want to go back to um, the naturopath and the diet change that you
Mhm.
went through at 4 years old. And you said that after you were put on the clean diet, your health improved. And then throughout the years, you have been refining what clean means. And one of the reasons why we stay with Azure Standard is because a lot of the ingredients in there is already clean, that we don't have to do any further research. We trust that if it's listed on your website, and I know that there have been conversations of whenever there's a product on there, there's enough, it's almost open source, right? There's enough of us where um, if there's a concern, we voice it. I know that Azure Standard does address it almost immediately.
If
Um,
we find out about something, and it does happen from time to time, just like yesterday, we found out one of the olive brands that we've been carrying for like 30 years, um, just started using ferrous gluconate
Mm.
in their, which is for color, right? It's like and that's on our no-no list. We don't, I don't even know if we have it listed, but it's definitely an artificial color enhancer. So I definitely throw it in with artificial colors
yeah.
if not. I don't know if we name it, if we list it by name, but it's something we've never had. And all this, for whatever reason, they decided to start using that in their product. And
Like,
so we're working on how to get that all back to them right now
Wow.
because a customer told us, and I didn't catch it right away. I mean, the can looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
The UPC is the same. Everything was the same, except, in the ingredient panel, they said it. And when the customer opened it, oh, these are way blacker than they usually are.
I love that you
Mm.
listen to your customers' input and take action right away.
Oh yeah, we're gonna take action on something like that in a heartbeat. We don't want that kind of crap going out there because that's what we're trusted for and what we know. Um, and we are planning to do. There's actually a brand new feature that one of the things that makes it really hard at Azure is discontinuing things that are good sellers. For instance, like these olives. Now I have another olive that is just as good and very similar, but because we've been doing this one for 30 years, we have there's tens of hundreds of thousands, maybe even, that have it like in their favorites list and stuff. And so if we discontinue it, then it just disappears and they think we don't carry olives anymore. Their favorite olives are suddenly gone. So I just have a feature right now because of this exact problem where we're able to say this is an almost exact substitute for this product, maybe a
Great.
different brand or whatever.
Recommended.
And so this is a recommended substitute. So with the next time they pull their favorites list up, it'll have it there, that there'll be a little red banner across it and says substitute available, and add this to my exchange this in my favorites. So with one click of a button, the new item will become their favorites instead of the old item just disappearing.
Perfect.
So that'll allow us to whittle away at our lowest end products. You'd have that with a few other things, like for instance, our conventional spices. A lot of, because of our volume with organic spices versus conventional, we can almost get them for the same price. It's
Wow.
not a lot different, but yet spices there's a lot of chemicals used in spice production, especially in Asia. So having organic, when we're going to India or something for spices, so have just swapping those out, but yet we've had those conventional spices before organics were even available from that part of the world. They are now. So we've got so many thousands. So we're going to be pecking away at those items that are, there's no reason that we need to carry that conventional, and we'll put that banner up and let folks switch to the organic cinnamon instead of the conventional, for instance, or something like that.
That's fantastic. Going back to the one example that you gave with your olive company, I mean, with the amount of business that you're able to draw for them, knowing that, is there any possibility that they may retract to using the ferrous gluconate, for example, so that they don't lose you as a partner?
I don't know. That particular company, that probably will not happen with, because we probably are not a big enough player in their space. But we are in the company that we're going to be moving them to, we are.
Yeah.
We're probably, a pretty good chunk of their business.
Yeah.
So my guess is probably not for that particular one, but we have been able to exert influence in some areas.
That's great. That's great. I mean, it's just keeping everybody to make sure that they hold themselves to a higher standard as well. So I'm curious now, after many, many years of going through the journey of the clean diet, I'm wanting to understand how you define what clean means when you're sourcing food. And it could mean, I'm curious to hear it from what your beliefs are.
Well, to be super simple about it, it's basically as close as the way God and nature made it as possible. That's the bare definition. Then you get into all the details there. Okay, nature didn't put poisons, agricultural chemicals on a plant to keep it from getting bugs on it. But what nature did do to keep a plant from getting bugs on it is, in a healthy plant, it produces a very complex sugar. The complex sugar is actually healthy for animals or humans. It is not healthy for bugs. Simple sugars are the ones that bugs thrive on. The healthier a plant is, the more complex the sugars are that plant produces. And I'm saying this in a little bit more of a general way. So if we can raise healthy plants, we don't have to put the chemicals on to kill the bugs, because the bugs don't even see it as food.
Mhm.
if that kind of makes sense. So looking at it, that's where regenerative agriculture comes into play. So what do I look at? How close is it to the way God and nature made it? This is, in the case of these vegetables or whatever, that's pretty pure stuff. If we're just doing frozen broccoli or something, we just freeze broccoli, right? But we also want to make sure that it was healthy enough that we didn't have to use deadly chemicals to keep bugs off of that broccoli. It's not, you know. Now, when we get into the refined and processed foods, then we're looking at kind of the same thing. What is in that? If it's a mixture of things that are very well found in nature, if it's sourdough bread and we put, you know, wheat, whole wheat flour, salt, and some bacteria starter together and we make sourdough bread, I consider that to be very close to the way nature made it. But yes, we processed it. We ground the wheat into flour. We fermented the dough with bacterial starter to create a sourdough bread loaf. So it's a processed product of sorts. It's bread, but it's is about as clean as you can get. There's nothing in there that is not readily found in nature. Now, if you're going one step further and you want to use, for instance, a preservative in that bread because you want it to stay on the shelf longer, now you've just stepped away because that was created in a chemical lab of some sort. And, you know, it's not something that is readily found in nature and mixed together as food, I should say.
Mhm.
Maybe it was found in nature and natural gas or something, but it wasn't found in food.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to go a layer deeper because for us, this journey into food and land and farming has been deeply tied to our faith. And, was that also part of your story in the early days of your farming and food ventures?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, our family has, you know, I often I often tell people that in some ways our faith was more influenced by our farming
Mhm.
and our farming by our faith. In some ways, for instance, many years ago, back, in the late 70s, early 80s, I guess, um, we were, we we're fairly new in the faith, and but we had started farming organically, and there were some challenges in there. Well, if faith is for our whole life, then there ought to be something in the Bible about farming. So we started reading in the Bible about everything about farming. And you know what? There actually is a few things in the Bible about farming.
Yes.
Quite a few, actually. And so we started going down the path, and there was a few things that we found. You know, one is about the mingled seed. So you're looking at hybridization. And so we became pretty big fans of, open pollinated seeds and that kind of thing. Another is about the Sabbath of years. I don't know, how many people have actually even read that part of the Bible, but in the Torah and the Old Testament of the Bible, both, there's a section in there about resting your soil every seventh year. And what is, what does that mean? You suddenly, um, so we actually started doing that. And then later we realized that maybe we should be resting ourselves every seventh day because that was in the Bible too, as as another thing. And that's when we actually became um, Sabbath keepers, I guess, for lack of a better term, where we started observing the Sabbath day as a family and not just as a farm. So we didn't even think about it before. I mean, every farmer, it's like you work,
Mhm.
but no, we actually found that by observing, and that's the beautiful thing about that is by doing some of those things, you actually reap a benefit at the same time. It's not that suddenly you have one less day to work. It's that in the other 6 days that you get way more than
Mhm.
1/6 more accomplished. You get a third more accomplished because you had that rest day where you rejuvenated both physically and spiritually and became ready to hit the week in the best possible way and became way more efficient. And it's just been, it's been not only do you have the day of rest, but you actually get more done.
Yes, David, I just love hearing that. We've been in the same vein looking for answers in the Bible since 2020 and came to be Torah observant and keeping the Sabbath. And this last year, from March 28th of 2025 till the spring equinox this month, is when we took our Sabbath, or when we've been taking and honoring the Sabbath year. So our land has been resting, and we're really, really excited to get back to our hands in dirt and start growing out all of the veggies and all of the fruits and everything back. But it is really great to know that. I only recently found out about your faith. I knew that I trusted your standards at Azure Standard, but just hearing that, hearing your faith and your belief and your values and seeing it reflected is just great. And I thought it would be great to highlight on our interview. And one of the hints that I got from Azure Standard is I noticed that you don't sell any pork as well.
Yeah, and that is specifically because of the Torah observant standards.
Yeah.
So we've not sold, pork or shellfish, which are pretty much that side.
Oh.
And nothing against folks that are not at that place in their journey, and we have team members that are not. But, I feel like, hey, if you want to grow your own pork, that's one thing, but that's not something that I'm going to connect.
Yeah.
Um, and and we have a couple things like, we don't sell alcoholic products, but that's not necessarily from a biblical standpoint. That's
Mm,
just because from a regulatory standpoint, we can't do it.
mm,
We're crossing into 50 states.
yeah.
Not that I'm a big fan of alcohol anyway, but that's not for the same reason, right? Because those are the two that I get asked about the most. There's two things that are on your list of prohibited items that are not about health. Why are you doing that? So basically, it's the unclean meats and the alcohol.
Yep.
And they're actually for two different reasons, but
Yeah. We met with some farmers who there's lots of thoughts around it. And so yeah, one of the things that I also wanted to talk about though is I didn't know that you had a list of prohibitive foods. I guess that's on your website.
oh yeah, if you go to azurestandard.com and pull up about Azure, it's under about, and then the little drop down says product standards.
Okay.
And then I did a video, that's probably a few years ago, what Azure bans and why. So I tell the why behind each one of the things that are on that list. And then I tell a little, I guess there's another video there that's a little bit about the harmful chemicals that get into food. Um, but then if you go down towards the bottom of that, there's what's called Azure's unacceptable ingredient list for food items. And then we have natural flavorings, one, and then external use products, prohibited
Great.
products.
Great.
And this is still growing. There's more stuff adding on to this all the time.
Is MSG an item on your list or the many
It
names of MSG?
it is.
Great.
Well, I think I don't know if I listed specific. Yeah, I do. I actually have it listed specifically. Monosodium glutamate is on there, right?
Right.
between fluoride and artificial nitrates. These kinds of things that, but MSG, I mean, you were talking about
Yes.
Oriental food, and
Yes.
MSG is a real problem in that space.
It is. And if you're a listener and you have not yet gotten your copy of the Nourishing Asian Kitchen, you can actually purchase it through Azure Standard as well. Azure Standard does carry our book there. And we're partners with Azure Standard. We have discount codes below on this link here that you can then use to apply. If you haven't yet tried out Azure Standard, we highly recommend it. I often go through, yeah, with the our food and cooking Asian foods. We make our own spice mixes that our children sell, and it's all because we looked into the Asian spices and the Asian ingredients. And we've got book number 2 coming out, The Nourishing Asian Homestead, which we would love for you to consider carrying also at Azure Standard. But maybe you can share a little bit about what we were talking before we hit record on the call about the one straw revolution.
Oh, yeah. So at not too long, about the same time we were looking in the Bible for answers in organic farming, um, I was starting to try to find things to read that might point to, because, really organic farming was done for
Wow.
thousands and thousands of years before conventional farming, and chemicals were only used for 100 before that time in the 80s. We'd really only been using chemicals for 100 years and really only 50 for the really harsh stuff.
Yeah.
And so how could it have been lost in that short a time? So there's got to be some really good. So I started digging through old books, and I came across this book, and it was from, I believe, a Japanese man, called The One Straw Revolution. And so he was actually talking about what we today know as regenerative agriculture. He did not use that term, but he was talking about getting the bacteria right in your soil and how to do that. And it just completely piqued my interest. Oh, that's what it's about. We're raising bacteria. Bacteria is raising crops. And I'm saying that it's a little more complicated than that. There's fungi and other things involved. But that was kind of what I came away from with after I read that book. So it was a really, it was kind of a maybe beginning of a journey. Not that I really got that terribly much out of that specific book, but it opened my eyes to where to go on the journey. And that's when I really became involved in learning about soil health and building the bacteria content in the soil, building the fungi, you know, and the protein and the balance of the minerals in the soil and all that kind of stuff. And he didn't even go into a lot of that. His was all just on the bacteria side, but it it really started me on that journey to really make a regenerative farm out of an organic farm. And we really spent the next 10 years doing that, really even before Azure was really born.
Wow, that's incredible. I think you will truly enjoy our second book, The Nourishing Asian Homestead, then, because we definitely reference the work of Matsunobu, which is the author of the One Straw Revolution, and he is a Japanese farmer. But there was also the work of Dr. Master Cho, who then came from the Korean natural farming world, and like through this journey of health and food and farming, we realized that it's a closed loop system. So the first book was in the kitchen, but when the publisher came back and asked me to write another cookbook, I said, no, I need to close the loop and bring it back to the homestead, because in our journey, I've learned a lot from my grandfather, who was a Vietnam refugee, my mother, and my grandmother as well. And he learned a lot of it, but didn't understand the soil science backing of it. And now for us to come through and understand soil health, the microbiomes, the fungi, and the bacteria that's needed to grow really healthy, nourishing plants for us and our gut microbiome as well. that's one of the reasons why we wrote the book, because it's not so much farming the last 100 years. It is farming back from thousands of years, where I feel like the true scientists were farmers. That's how they survived. That's how we've survived this time, is because if you didn't grow your own food and figured out how to farm then, they wouldn't pass on the next generations. And
You would go hungry
we
because
would
there
go
was some.
hungry.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. In today's world, that's not necessarily always the case. There's, all kinds of food subsidies and everything that happens. So farmers have gotten a little lazier from that sense, but you're right, long term, and it's not just on the Asian side. The same
Yeah.
thing, if you go back into the European traditions as well, you can see very similar patterns to that.
Right.
So I've studied on both sides of the kind of both sides of the continent of where agricultural, if you go to like the Fertile Crescent really is, they claim that's kind of where agriculture started. I don't know if that's totally true. It seems like it sprouted up in 3 or 4 different places throughout the world, um, at in similar times. But in the Fertile Crescent, they were talking about the exact same thing.
Yes.
Um, you read some of those early writings, they're like, yeah, they didn't use the same terminology, but they used it's still all about the microbiome or the bacteria, fungi, and the life of the soil. There's more life in one handful of soil than there is humans on Earth.
Right.
It's incredible the amount of life that's in soil.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that all of that life depends on plants, and all plants depend on
Mhm.
that life to survive. Neither one can survive without the other. I
Right.
don't know, a lot of people say, oh, well, but how could a microbe can't survive without energy? Energy only comes from photosynthesis, which only happens in plants and a few algae.
Mhm.
So it's completely dependent on that. It has no other way. And the plant cannot actually utilize just rock. It has to have a colloidal mineral of some sort that is only can be provided by what's been broke down
Yep.
by microbial life. So it's a beautiful cycle,
And
and
it's
it shows that God developed those together. It's very clear to me.
Mhm.
We were just discussing this before the interview, and I loved how you brought it full cycle. It's not just simply about bringing wholesome food to other people. It's not just a business for you. It's a whole story from your childhood to now, and understanding that full cycle. And for us, it seems like our goals are aligned, because we're trying to educate and train others about where your food comes from. And it all comes back to the soil. It all comes back to the microbes. And you were just talking about it, and that's correct in terms of creating these complex carbohydrates. The plants create these complex sugars for the microbes, and then the microbes, the local microbes, help nourish the plants so that they become more pest resistant and produce this nourishing fruit, or nourishing whatever it is, the products,
vegetable, grass, even.
vegetables that, or the grass that our
Grass.
cattle consume, and then we
Mhm.
consume that, and it all comes back to our bodies and builds a healthier gut biome. So this is wonderful.
I've
Yeah.
loved this conversation. And in our book, we do talk about bokashi,
Mhm.
and we talk about wheat bran and how to source clean bokashi. And you can also find bokashi grains at Azure Standard, as well as
Yeah.
wheat bran, to make the ferments that we we will be releasing our book and our recipes out in the Nourishing Asian Homestead. So
Mhm.
Azure Standard are
Well, we
fantastic.
look forward to being able to take a look at that,
Yeah.
Yeah,
because that sounds like it's very useful
Yeah.
yes,
for many of our homesteaders for sure.
absolutely. Well, one thing that I want to end with is asking you, for you and I, we have gone through, for you particular, David, you have been on this journey much, much longer than we have. But for families who are just starting to look and learn into the quality of our food and soil and potentially even trusting the current food system that we have today, what's something about our food system today that would genuinely shock a health conscious family? And can you give a real example of that? Something that you've seen firsthand?
Oh, I mean, there's a ton of them, but if we just think about the desiccation by glyphosate, that one is so dang scary. So glyphosate it's an artificial protein that's used to kill weeds. So the the FDA has approved farmers to use that directly on crops after it's ripe and ready to go to kill it so they don't have to swab it so they can straight calm it, just to make farming a little easier. And that happens up in the northern tier. Almost all the oats that we consume, a fair amount of the northern tier wheat, not in all of the country, but in many areas. And that glyphosate, because the protein is so similar to that of L-glycine, that it gets into the joints of people because the body mistakes it. L-glycine is what lubricates the joints, and now we're seeing this glyphosate get in there, and it's absolutely eating the nation's joints.
Yeah.
You see people with joint replacements left and right, all kinds of back pain and everything else that comes with joint deterioration. And that is directly linked to the glyphosate. And not only that, the the current administration just signed
Right.
law into place, basically making Bayer, who owns Roundup, which is the most frequent brand of that, not liable for the damage that it does.
Right.
So now it is a protected product from a military and strategic standpoint.
Yeah, and I'd love
So there's kind of a shocking thing right there.
yes, it is very shocking, and that's something why we are speaking out, and writing this book. Uh, but I'd love to hear your thoughts because that has been a controversial topic, um, and how they said, well, the other side is saying, well, if if we didn't legalize or grant immunity to companies that produce glyphosate, then our entire food system would collapse and we wouldn't be able to feed people anymore. Um, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I have my own. Um,
Well, that's bullcrap fed to politicians by chemical companies and drug companies. No, we can raise just as much food per acre in an organic and regenerative system as the conventional guys can grow using their stuff. It Now I will say it does take a little bit more labor. There's going to be more employment involved in doing that. There's going to be a few more jobs, yes, in agriculture because it is more work. But no, there is no shortage of food in a regenerative system. There is no shortage either way.
Yeah, and
So,
even
yeah,
even going back to, I think it even has its roots back to the Vietnam War with Agent Orange, in terms of we used it as a military weapon against the enemy to bring down a lot of the crops. So,
well, and bring down the foliage and all that. And
mhm.
crazy enough, they've named it different things, but we still use that in agriculture to this day.
Yeah,
that is,
It's used. In fact, I just saw it being sprayed this morning on one of the neighbors out here. Well,
mm,
it, yeah,
yeah,
it's still, yeah, you put a new cover on it, you give it a new name, but it's still the same thing.
yeah. And one of the things that Azure just also introduced recently is your Azure Well and supplements. And I know that Azure, as a mission and as a company, you strive to make nourishing, nutrient dense foods and products available to everybody. Can you tell us a little bit more about your supplements?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, I've always been a food is your medicine fan for many, many years. I shouldn't say always, but for the last 25 years. And I was very resistant to the supplement thing. But then I realized that we have a entire population that has some form of illness. I just read from a government statistic that 55% of children, i.e., under 18, have been diagnosed with a chronic disease in the United States.
Wow.
That's a shocking statistic. And that was from the, the federal health department. That's not something I came up with. And that is unacceptable. We need to change that. And so I started looking at, and a lot of naturopaths do that. Hey, their supplementation is a good way to cleanse the body, get it back on track so you can supplement your microbiome, etc., so you can get your body back on track. And I started looking at supplements, and so many of them were full of excipients, silicon dioxide, this and that, fillers, just junk. And I kept saying, somebody ought to probably make a clean line of supplements. Finally, I decided maybe I was that somebody. So we actually spun up a department within Azure that to do exactly that. And we're up to about 60 different items right now on the supplement side. And we will have more as time goes on. But um, it's very important. There's hundreds of millions of Americans that need to get away from the chronic disease into a healthy state. And then the supplements can go away and we can just eat healthy food. Once we get a healthy microbiome and we're eating nutrient dense food from a regenerative farm.
Right.
So blessings on that, and let's make that the goal. But nothing, but let's look at some clean supplements to get from point A to point B, from a state of less than optimum health to optimum health.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, David, for your time here with us on our Call to Farms podcast. We are excited. Any of the links below we will have. If you have not yet tried Azure Standard, definitely check out the mission, the products that David and his family and team have made available to all of us around the country. So, David, is there anything else that you would like to say to our audience who maybe have not yet heard of Azure Standard yet?
Well, I just want to offer our blessings to your journey. And remember, we're here to help inspire healthy and abundant living, and we want to help in any way that we can, wherever you're getting your food from. That is our mission.
Great. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, David.
All right. Blessings.
Blessings.